Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming and joining us on a Wednesday evening. My name is Blair Barnette, and I'm the chair of the British Film Designers Guild. And the Guild was formed 70 years ago with the aim of raising standards and profile of the art department and protecting the interests of its members. And those core principles still apply today. We are a fantastic community of over 600 accredited skilled technicians and designers whose talents span the various branches of the art department in film and television. And joining me tonight is Mark Scruton, production designer from Wednesday. Lots of beautiful things. Your work is amazing. And we are here in discussion with Chuck Parker from the ADG, the Art Directors Guild of America. He's the National Executive Director, and we are here talking about the strikes in America, how they affect the art department, why we should care about what's happening, and to discuss a little bit about projecting what might happen in the future. Hi, Chuck. Oh, I think you're still on mute now.
I keep it muted when I'm not talking. Hello, everyone. Hi, Blair. Thanks, everyone, for joining in tonight. I hope I can lend some kind of clarity, but I do need to say, starting off, that I am here voluntarily participating as the executive director of the Art Directors Guild. I am not an official representative of the IA, so I do need to say that. But let's get going. Let's start with the questions, and maybe we can shed some light on some of this for you guys.
Well, for starters, what is the atmosphere like in America for the art department in general? How are things affecting on the ground for you guys there?
Well, we have basically now, for the second time in 3 years, see almost complete unemployment because of this. It's almost as the same levels as we had when we had production shut down for COVID. Probably a little more. We still have people working in broadcasts that are not in shows that are not associated with the AMPTP, which, for those of you who don't know, stands for the Association of Motion Picture and Television Producers, and it's a trade organization. That's who we negotiate for the basic agreement, and also area standards agreement in the rest of the country. There are people we have graphic artists who are working on news and sports shows, but that's about it. You know, we have maybe 2 or 3 shows that are able to prep right now. And because the studios are allowing them to, and they're still getting paid. But other than that, we have basically complete unemployment. So the mood is rather dour. I will say, though, that there is still quite a bit of support for the issues that the writers and the actors are striking on.
Well, that's one of the questions I have. How do we in the art department relate to those issues for what they're fighting for in their negotiations? How is it relevant to us in the art department?
Well, there's 2 levels of relevance. You know, the number one level is that they are sister organizations. They are part of the AFL-CIO. They feel that they are being treated unfairly, and for that reason alone, we support them. The employers are not reasonably and respectfully addressing their key issues. So for that reason, we support them. Now, you can look at their list of grievances, what they're trying to negotiate for, and I see some issues that extrapolate to ours. You know, of course, there's wages. We're coming out of a period of pretty high inflation in this country, so they're asking for more money. But the employers are also cutting, particularly the writers, they're cutting them short. They're cutting their prep time short. When you see reference in the list of the writers' room's concerns, you see what's called the mini rooms. Their amount of prep time is being cut, just like our prep time is being truncated. I don't know how it is in England, but in the United States, there are many times you're lucky if you get more than 4 or 5 weeks prep.
Mm.
So that is it's a similar issue. Another issue that has become very prevalent since the onslaught of streaming is the issue of residuals. And now this is something that is different for us. You know, one thing that separates us from the rest of the world is healthcare, and it's a big deal.
Mhm.
You know, I am married to a subject of the British Crown. She's not an American citizen. We've been married for over 30 years. I have experienced the need for medical care when I've been visiting my in-laws in Manchester and have discovered the joy. One time I walked across the street to a pharmacist to have a prescription filled out. I handed him my passport, and then when he handed me the prescription, I asked him, I said, "How much do I owe you?" And he looked at me in horror and he says, "It's against the law for me to charge anyone who's over 60 for medication." You know, and I went, "That's what I'm talking about." You know, here it's a big deal. You know, healthcare is a huge deal, and it is a large part of our negotiations every contract cycle. Now, the reason I'm bringing that up is the funding mechanism for our healthcare and pension is the same thing because we don't get a pension from the government. So the funding mechanism for that comes through residuals. Now you'll hear about royalties and residuals for actors and writers. Well, they are considered legally that they share in authorship. The directors share in authorship, and some of the producers do, depending on what level they are. We, however, below the line, we do not. Our share in residuals is contributions that are paid by the employer for every hour worked and or guaranteed, and it goes into either motion picture industry pension and health plan or into the national benefit fund that the IA administers for the rest of the country outside of Los Angeles County. So that is a very big deal, and the streamers particularly have been very reticent to quantify the number of viewers on the streaming platform. So, you know, they just open it up. You can watch it as many times as you want. They say they don't track that. I don't believe that for a second.
No.
But that's what they say. And we have had to go through, we had to jump through numerous hoops and come up with very creative formulas that are based on size of the budget, length of the program, the number of subscribers to a platform, to come up with a reasonable formula so that we could enjoy enough benefit contributions to fund the plans. And we actually have. We came up with something in 2018 that worked very successfully, so much so that during the production shutdown caused by COVID, we were able to fund eligibility extensions for people because, you know, our healthcare is based on working, and if you're not working, you're not earning the necessary hours to get the healthcare. So that's always a part of any of our negotiations for any of us, writers, directors, actors. So we will be, the IA right now is analyzing very deeply what the directors were able to get in their successful negotiations, and we will wait and see what the writers and actors come up with. And we're preparing for our negotiations, which will probably begin next March in 2024. So it's right around the corner, really. That is basically it. You know, those two issues. You have residuals, prep, the working conditions around prep, and wages are how I look at it. Those are the three big issues.
Those are all
Now,
quite...
you know, AI obviously is a discussion, but I'll just cut to that really quickly. There are a lot of people who have concerns about legal issues, copyright issues, moral and ethical questions. I'm not really qualified to deal with that. I don't have a law degree or anything like that. I look at it strictly from a jurisdiction framework. If a director has skilled enough and is able to through Discord, go on to Midjourney and come up with their own lookbook, I really don't have a dog in that fight. If, however, the director or the producer assigns that task to a PA, a production assistant, or anyone that's not in our bargaining unit, then we will vigorously fight that and grieve them over it. So there are a lot of people who are afraid of AI and they think it represents the extinction of the human race. And I'm not going to get into that conversation. I am amazed at how quickly it is growing. I was in a board meeting a few weeks ago for MPI, and the guy who's head of IT for Motion Picture Industry Pension and Health Plan put up a chart, and it's very telling. That chart was for various popular social media platforms, the amount of time it took them to attain 100 million monthly users. 100 million monthly users. It took Facebook 50 months. It took Instagram 36 months. There was TikTok and a couple other in there. Chat GPT 3 last year came out in November. It took them 2 weeks to attain 100 monthly users. Chat GPT 4, which just came out recently, it took them 2 days. 2 days to get 100 million monthly users worldwide. Now, a member brought this up in a meeting last night about really how small a portion of AI we in the entertainment industry represent, because it's everywhere. It's everywhere in the medical community, in the legal community. It's all over the place. But you know, the producers have said to the actors that they want the freedom to hire extras, scan them completely, pay them for a day, and then be able to use their likenesses in perpetuity with no additional pay. Now, if you look at that, you know, for instance, when we did an episode on Monk that I was designing, where Monk was in a boxing ring, and they filled the stages. They contacted this organization and they brought all these cardboard cutout people and put them in the seats in the deep background. So it may not be any different than that, but every time you hire that company, you've got to rent those cardboard cutouts. And what the employer is looking at is the ability to use it ad infinitum. And of course, that's dead. That's dead at the beginning. But this is the approach they're taking.
And that would pack onto different crew people, because for each of those extras, you would have a makeup artist, you'd have
makeup,
a
hair, everything. Yeah,
on them. All the knockdown
absolutely.
jobs, as it unpacks, would suddenly not be getting more than a day's pay. Not even that, because they're not there on the day they're cast and scanned.
Yep.
I mean, and then presumably you could do whatever you like with someone's likeness, which seems an extraordinary thing to. You can have somebody, you can have yourself on screen doing something that you would not agree with and would not want to be a part of, and there's you in the middle of it all. It has massive ethical issues.
It takes some chutzpah to even ask for that, doesn't it?
No, well, and dig in over it. That's the thing that's extraordinary, that they're not prepared. That's one of the red lines that they're digging in over. Can I just ask, when you guys come to renegotiate in next year, I think you were saying, presumably that will be a thing in your negotiations. Do you think you have other issues in line with the writers and the actors that will come up?
Well, I need to see what we need to see what their proposals are. So I don't know yet. I don't know what they're going to propose to us. We'll have to wait and see. I'm already having conversations. You know, nobody's doing anything right now. I mean, I got labor relations people. They're sitting around too, just like our members. There are a few little agreements, but that are being negotiated. But I'm letting them know, you know, that we take this very seriously. If they want to use AI, fine. But hold on a minute. In our we have 4 contracts in our local, one for the illustrators and matte artists, one for the scenic and title and graphics, one for the art directors, and one for the set designers and model makers. And each one of these agreements has a paragraph at the end. It's paragraph 95, which is entitled Duties and Divisions of Work, in which it very loosely describes what it is each one of those crafts does. And there's a reason it's loose. It's wiggle room. Wiggle room is very valuable in a contract. So I rely on that. I rely on these descriptions. For instance, illustrators to depict two-dimensionally sequences. That's it, you know, and they're not technologically derivative. So that leaves the use of new technology is firmly in our court. You know, tools do not a carpenter make, is what I say. And it's true. So it doesn't matter whether a set designer is drawing with a pencil or drawing with a computer. So I will rely on that, and particularly with AI. You know, it doesn't matter what program they're using. It's our work. Does that answer your question?
Kind of, yeah. I think it's one of those things we'll only know as we start to experience the impact of it, you know, more and more, and we suddenly start to realize that certain things are falling away because they're being, you know, potentially impacted by AI. But I think it's quite a creep at the moment, isn't it? We're realizing that it's an insidious thing that's coming at us from different angles, and it's understanding it before it's too late, I think, is the key thing. Certainly with that element.
I will tell you one thing. One of our members has shown me how it works, and it's a real time saver. It's a real time saver. And I'm not just talking about a few minutes or a couple hours, you know. Yeah, it may cut down on the amount of people that are needed in some cases.
But do you think that they value what we do, though? That's my big concern, is that if anyone can get hold of Midjourney and type in a few commands and get great visuals out of it, that the sort of our professional, you know, ability is sort of suddenly marginalized quite considerably, potentially.
What I'm saying is I look at it jurisdictionally, so it'll be our people that use it.
Well, yes, but that's the thing we've got to try and figure out, isn't it? Because it's a free to access software that anybody can use, and it's not that tricky to use.
It's copy, you know, and it's something, you know, someone might see something that could be reused, but it's not original artwork.
No,
and
I agree.
It's certainly not necessarily script specific.
No, not at the moment. Yeah.
And what I'm worried about is the fact that it is like regurgitating other work. It doesn't seem to be creating anything intellectually, creatively new, but just kind of a dumbed down version of what we've seen before.
Yes, unfortunately, there's a lot of media kind of doesn't care about that. That's a slight issue.
No.
The mean average of everything being regurgitated is, you know, it could apply to quite a lot of product out there at the moment. You know, it's trying to maintain the integrity of what we do, I think, which is critical, and keep us relevant, which I think is most important. And it's where, you know, unfortunately the genie's out of the bottle, isn't it? So we can only run with it, but we do have to try and find a way of keeping ourselves in the game and staying on top of it, and not just becoming sort of sidelined as some archaic way of doing things when there's 16-year-olds in their bedroom that can do the same thing, as you say, in 10 minutes. So
if I were still working in the craft as a production designer, and I think that what I'm doing right now is how I'm going to go out, I would learn it.
For sure. That's the thing, is that you can't
just to know it.
Yeah.
I mean, this does bring up issues concerning our job security, and, you know, how many of our positions could, like you said, could be given to you know, directors come in with a Midjourney lookbook that's done by a PA that's bypassed the designer and handed directly to a set deck, and art director says, okay, do this. Now, I'm not just speculating. I've seen this happen twice in the last couple of months with people that I know. That they have actually, production has said, we're going to go in a different direction, and not hired a production designer because somebody in the office has just done a lookbook of the sets in Midjourney.
I'm sorry, did you say not hired the production designer or not hired a production designer?
Not hired one at all, bypass that role entirely.
Oh, well, see, that's a violation of the contract in this country. Can't do that.
Interesting.
And if I were to come over there and organize, that'd be one of the first things I did.
But that's the thing, isn't it? And that's more important than anything else, is keeping the control of those things and how we maintain the relevance and maintain the structure that and give us a level of integrity that is applicable. Which is, you know, that it's happening very quickly, the AI thing. So I think you know, what's relevant this week might be different next week and the week after. So I think it's definitely an issue which needs to be dug into quite quickly, from my perspective anyway. Yes, interesting times.
And we don't, like you've highlighted, there is such a strong union in America. We're not organized in the same way over here. We don't have that same sense of agency behind us. And the art department historically has been probably the least organized of the departments. So, I mean, that's something that I'm trying to promote within the BFDG, is this kind of sense of agency amongst our peers. At least if we're talking to each other, we have a bit of strength and we can unite together on that level, but we don't have that union background. So that's why these chats are so important, is just to, at least if we're all armed with the same ammunition, we can have the same answer when we push back.
I mean, that is the biggest problem, isn't it, with our industry, is that it's now such a global industry. You know, it doesn't rest. You know, as soon as it sees a shiny thing in another country, everything shifts there, or anything shifts there. And so keeping us, you know, front and center of the industry is as important as anything else. You know, I've noticed that myself, that the productions will twist and turn to fit into the box they need to, whether that means, you know, basing wherever they need to go. When, you know, it's not tied to any one country these days, is it?
No, it's not. When there was first so much work that we were sending over to England, I referred to it as reverse colonization in a way, but now it's just rampant, you know. And it's everywhere.
It's a global thing, you know. I mean, Dubai is now building a massive studio that they're hoping to send people over there. It's keeping the craft. That's what I was talking about. You know, our craft and our abilities relevant on the global market. I think, you know, across, you know, the guilds and everything else. You know, there's guilds in other countries as well that have the same, you know, desire to keep themselves, you know, relevant and working, and, you know, promote the creative abilities of it all. And I think, you know, grouping together, I think, is as important as anything else. You know,
on Spetses, grouping on Spetses, Greece. Yeah.
That was amazing. I mean, you've touched on learning Discord, learning Midjourney, some of these other, just learn how to use the technology, but how else might we better prepare ourselves for moments like this? And, you know, when it comes our turn to fight something, I mean, what more can we be doing to try to not be caught out and prepare ourselves for the future?
Well, you know, I mean, look, technology changes constantly, and I do not want to oversimplify this. You know, AI presents its own uncertainties. It breeds a lot of fear with people. It's also serving a lot of purposes across the economy, not just with entertainment. But we have had instances in the past in entertainment with this. You know, the most recent was the onslaught of computer-generated design, where the set designers were starting to use computers instead of pencil. You know, the introduction of sound, that changed the industry. We have constantly being forced to accept and adapt because of a technological advancement. This is not any different in that way. So that's why I said, if I were starting out, I would make sure that I was mastering this new technology, so I could at least be able to navigate my way through the landscape with it. Otherwise, I just don't know. And I won't really have a firm idea until we sit down with the employer next year and we see what their proposals are. and how they want to propose the use of AI for the below the line workers. I think that it's a more existential threat right now to the actors and the writers, but ask me again in March. You know.
Yes.
I mean, no, it's really too soon to tell or even be able to speculate, but when Hollywood goes back to work, what do you how do you think the landscape will have changed? Like what do you think these changes will be?
I wish I could say, the writers and the AMPTP got back together on Friday and they couldn't even agree on what to disagree on. So that lasted about an hour and a half. That's it. So until these guys get back together, I know there's a very good, very effective federal, United States federal mediator involved trying to get the sides back together. Until they get together and until the employer meaningfully deals with what these two guilds are asking for, I don't see a resolution right now. I know that there are different scenarios being worked out at the studios, and some of them are for a 50-day shutdown, and I'm talking about from now, 100 days shutdown, 150 days shutdown. I just don't know. So what we are doing right now in terms of IA labor leaders is we are looking and investigating ways that we can help our members, what sort of charity organizations are out there, how people can be helped in the interim. This organization, this guild, we put people to work at a lower rate, but at least they get benefits paid for. We're concerned about people falling out of healthcare, things like that. Those are things that if we can have some effect in that, that's where we're putting our energy right now. Our president, Matt Loeb, is involved and is in touch with the leaders of both the SAG and also, the Writers Guild. Any way we can help them, we will. We've got strikers right out here, out outside the gate of CBS Radford. They come in and they use our bathrooms in our building. Any way that we can assist them, we will. Other than that, I don't have a crystal ball to tell you. I wish they would just get back to the table.
Yeah, I mean, that's the alarming thing, isn't it? That they're not even talking at the moment, and they're saying it's such a big divide.
They're not officially talking. There's some back channel work going on, but
sure.
Neither, the AMPTP is a different kind of animal. Carol Lombardini is the president, and there are so many organizations in there with differing points of view, and they all have to agree. That's why it's so maddening to negotiate with them. It's really crazy. And now with the introduction of the tech companies, it's extremely different opposing philosophies in there. I mean, it's clear that the tech companies are not used to having to deal with unions. And now they have to, and it shows in our dealings with them. Thankfully, they hire seasoned entertainment labor executives, so we're able to deal with them on a day-to-day basis. But what they're trying to attain is just so crazy. I mean, the fact that they would even ask in a negotiation to scan an artist's likeness, pay them for one day, and never have to pay them again is very telling. Yeah. How they regard that as a resource,
and to dig in over it and to maintain that that's as you say, a perfectly valid thing to ask for. It's an extraordinary thing to ask for, isn't it?
Yeah. There are members. I have members in our organization who don't want anything that's machine, that is a product of machine learning. But only made by the hand of man. So, we have our differing points of view as well.
Sure.
Somebody's just written in to ask you to elaborate a little bit about the parameters of your regulations of not having a production with a production designer, that it's in the contract, there must be one. We just want you to extrapolate a little bit about how that works union wise. In the US,
Well,
obviously, we don't have that here.
Hold on a second. Let me see if I can find it real quick. When I want to look, when I want something, it's hard to find in these contracts.
Sure, they're huge.
You know,
and maybe just a little bit about how unions actually work, how like if there is a violation, how you change it, how you actually go after the employer, how you have the power to do anything to the employer when they're making these infractions. And I think that a lot of people, if they're not in the union, they don't really understand how that even works.
Well, we grieve them. We have a process of conflict resolution involving grievances and arbitration. So in Los Angeles County, we have an organization called CSATF, which is the Contract Service Administration Trust Fund. It administers the contracts. And when we grieve a company over what we perceive to be a violation of the contract, that grievance is heard by two individuals at Contract Services. One represents management and one represents labor. It's non-binding. If both sides don't accept the decision, then we go to arbitration. Then arbitration is another form of conflict resolution that is binding. And there are federal arbitrators. There's a whole federal arbitration, and in the contract, there's a whole list of arbitrators that you can choose from. And the first side, both sides have to agree on the arbitrator. And these are intense legal exercises in which you argue in front of an arbitrator. Then and sometimes they can take days. You call in witnesses, you present your arguments, you present your evidence, and then the arbitrator gives a decision. The IA, the International Alliance of Theatrical and Stage Employees, has been, they like to go to arbitration as a last resort because we have to be very careful. For instance, the IA out here, the West Coast studio locals, there are 13 of us, and we negotiate collectively. They call it a collective bargaining agreement. And we have to make sure when we go to arbitration that if we were to get an arbitration that was unfavorable to us, that it would not also automatically apply to another local. So you have to be careful about unintended consequences. So it is a complicated process. You have to think it through. You have to be prepared. But you can win, and we have won. And so it's an established system for conflict resolution between the two parties.
Can I just ask you something? In general, in America, where you have, is the relationship between production and, let's say, the art department, because that's what we're talking about, is that a much more adversarial relationship? Because in here, it's not. You know, you try your best to be sort of production friendly and work together. And be, you know, work as a team.
It's a collaborative art form, you know. I mean,
well, that's what I thought. The whole union thing doesn't drive a wedge between it. That's always my sort of worry, is that it would always create that sort of friction all the time.
It doesn't really, you know. We don't let it. I mean, you're as successful as you can best get along with people, I find, you know.
I know that's what I think. But I think it's always a concern here that we end up, you know, at loggerheads all the time with productions, you know, the production department, if we start in over stuff. But
we rarely do. There are some instances. There are a few things that come up. They're usually financially oriented, just regular actions. You know, we have a system that works here, and the smart producers know that. It's like, I like to say that carpentry is a science because there's a reason for everything that's done. And the same with filmmaking. I mean, it's the people who come in and try and reinvent filmmaking are the ones that end up in trouble. Well, you know, we have a pretty good system and it works.
That's very true. Yeah. Yes, I've seen that happen a couple of times.
That's true. Yeah.
How are they going to do anything without any content right now? That's that's getting to be. Surely they must be running out. Productions.
You know,
Productions
I thought the same thing coming out of COVID, and then you got Netflix running around the world making content all over the place. So ultimately they will. I started looking through. I've binged for about 4 weeks now, and I'm running out.
Yeah, and I think the impact from the strikes in America have hit the global production. We should, COVID was a little bit different. You could sneak off somewhere and make a show somewhere which the COVID restrictions weren't as heavy or whatever else. But it really has, as you were saying about America, the production in this country has come to a virtual standstill. I think certainly on feature.
Well, the dispute, the contract dispute is with the Writers Guild of America and SAG-AFTRA. So if someone has a script, say Netflix has got a script that was written in Korea, and they're not using SAG-AFTRA actors, they can go into production.
Yes, but they have to initiate that now, though. But they haven't been doing it. So they're suddenly presumably running to catch up and get those things going. But
absolutely, yeah. I mean, I was talking to a friend of mine, a buddy of mine, a British production designer this morning, and he said he's got a project he's probably going to go into development with. He'll know in another couple of weeks, but it will not have any American actors, members of SAG in it, and it will not have been written by a member of the Writers Guild of America. Now, there still are scripts out there that were turned in and registered before their contract expired. We have a few shows here in America, maybe 6 or 7, that have a lot of prep, a big build. Some of them are working right now, and they're being a little cautious, the studio, and one of them has said, you can go until September 15th, and then we'll take a look at it and see how far along you are. But it's just a handful, and it's just a handful of members that are working.
Okay.
I wish I could tell you when it's gonna end, but I can't.
No. I mean, nobody has a magic ball, as you said. But do you think there's going to be, when it does end, do you think there's going to be a massive scramble, mix up just to get everything made? And like after COVID, we had a good 1.5 to 2 years of, you could hire your next door neighbor to work on a job. There wasn't enough crew.
I think the dam will burst. I think the dam will burst. However, I do think that the glut of streaming might not come back to the level it was. We started noticing a slowdown back in September of last year. Now, this had to do with streaming as a business model.
Okay.
Because there were companies that were just spending money, and the investors were saying, well, where's our return? So there was a slowdown for that. But by the time you got into January, the reticence to begin a project was definitely related to the 2 contracts that were coming up.
I mean, they're pretty much saying as much, aren't they, about, you're now saying quality over quantity, and, we've generated too much stuff. They're saying it out loud. So there's definitely going to be not the sort of free for all it was a couple of years ago, I think. But hopefully, I think what you're gonna see here sooner than later is the introduction of we call it SVOD, subscription video on demand. That's the term that's in our contract, but there's also AVOD, which is advertising based video on demand. I would not be surprised if we don't start seeing more advertising in the streaming projects, because it's revenue. Well, Netflix model is now doing that, isn't it? And certainly some of the streamers in the UK are started to promote. Well, adding adverts and then promoting to get rid of them is the other model, which is, I think, Channel 4 are now doing, which is promoting a non-commercial subscription-based version of their streaming channel, which is heavily uses advertising.
I don't think subscriptions are enough to pay for the level of production that they wanted. I think this is what they found out, and this is what the investors were pointing out to them.
But it's finite, isn't it? In the end, you can your subscription will eventually, your numbers will eventually level off, and then you have a finite pot. And if you haven't, got the revenue, which is why the film box office works the way it does, isn't it? And I can never figure out how streaming was eventually gonna keep that level of production going the way it has done, and it clearly isn't going to.
No, it's not. I remember years ago, you'd be watching dailies, you'd be working on a movie, and a producer will look and see what they had and think, oh, wow, this is going to be great. They'd be willing to put more money in, because in the end, their money would come from box office receipts, which could be infinite. Sorry about that, guys. But television is finite. Television is just licenses agreements. So we're going to have to see how that evolves. And that's tied in with the subject of what I talked about earlier, is how do they quantify viewership in streaming? Because that's what it's going to boil down to, particularly if advertising gets involved in it. They're going to want to know what they're getting for their dollar.
Yeah, absolutely.
We won't be able to share our passwords anymore.
Yeah. But you used to turn on my screen at my house on Netflix, and it would have myself, my wife, our children, and our in-laws in Manchester, England. Well, Netflix found them out. So they can't tell me that they don't know who's watching what.
No.
Any other questions?
Just I guess it's the levels of how many things come from America over here. I mean, we have scripts that are written here that are obviously being done, and we have actors who are in both the SAG-AFTRA and they're in Equity, which is the union over here, and they're in both, and they seem to still be working over here. I don't know if they're getting waivers or how that's working, but I guess
I'd have to look at their contracts and see what the language of their contract says.
Yeah,
because it may just be Equity and they're not working as SAG.
Right. Okay. I didn't know how when you straddled the two, but I guess it's the level of work that's coming from America. We've seemed to be found out to almost be at a complete standstill when it comes to like feature filmmaking, and a lot of our streaming stuff seems to originate from America. And that's not necessarily a question, but your thoughts on the percentages of like how much we rely on the industry in Hollywood. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I can tell you that I have a person here in the office who tracks production, and we keep an eye on as much as we can find that's produced here in this country, is produced here in Los Angeles, is produced in Santa Fe, Albuquerque, New Orleans, Atlanta, Wilmington, North Carolina, Chicago, Boston. Those are the main production centers that have evolved over the last 15 to 20 years outside of Los Angeles. But we also keep an eye on Vancouver and Toronto, London, Budapest, Prague. So it seems to me that at any given time, particularly in the London area, there might be 7 or 8 shows that were coming from the studios here. And I only know because I go to England at least once a year to visit my in-laws, and then I'll take a day or two off and go down to London and just visit our members there. So that seems to be a pretty good number. And they're typically pretty large productions.
We've got one more question here that says, SAG-AFTRA has approved a limited number of independent films to remain in production. Do you think these are mostly UK based or also US based or also UK based? And do you think there could be top grade production designers or cinematographers who might work on an indie feature just to keep ticking along?
There are a few of those, and I get that list daily.
Okay.
SAG shares them with the IA. So far, the majority of them are projects that are almost already done, and they're in the editing phase right now, so the editors are working on them. There are a few of the low budget feature category. I don't know if you heard Sarah Silverman spoke up a couple weeks ago and gave an expletive laden, outburst about what the hell, are we on strike or not, and then she got called in, the nanny called her in and they explained what was going on. And she said, well, okay, I guess. But then the next day, Viola Davis pulled out of her project, G20. She goes, you know what? We're on strike. I'm not doing it.
Mm.
So there are a few, but there is a reticence on the part of the actors to do them. But there are a few going on.
Okay. I think we've worked through a lot of our questions. We were kind of at the end of our time. Do you have any other words of wisdom or any other thoughts on, what
just hang tight, don't despair. This will get resolved.
Yes.
I worry more right now for my members here. I'm very concerned about ones that are in danger of falling off of healthcare. And we are working overtime. I'm a director on the executive board for MPI, and we're coming up with all different ways. It's different now than when we had COVID, because COVID was attacking everybody, and the board of directors for MPI is an equal number of management and an equal number of labor, and management is not in the mood to participate right now because of a labor dispute. So we're having to come up with our own creative ways to assist our members. So I started this out saying that this is our main concern right now, is how do we help our members who are suffering? But we'll get through this. I'd be surprised if this goes on for another few months. I'm hopeful that there may be a resolution by the end of September, but hope springs eternal.
I've heard some rumors that something in September would that's what they're aiming for. At least that's what things are looking like. But yeah, that's just a big fingers crossed. So
I mean, there's an article in the LA Times this morning about wanting the governor to get involved. The Governor Newsom in California, he is very pro-labor. President Biden is the most pro-labor president in history. But Governor Newsom also relies on heavy donations from the studios. So he's got to be, he's got to navigate carefully here.
we really appreciate you taking the time out now and speaking to us. It's been enlightening. It's been really useful to hear how things are on the ground there. I just can thank you for that and for sharing your wisdom and for keeping up the good fight.
Well, I wish I had more definite answers for you, but if anybody wants to reach out to me, feel free. I have the easiest damn email address I've ever had in my life. It's chuck@adg.org. Simple.
I was so impressed with that. From our standpoint over here, I literally am trying to get everybody talking, to get everybody approachable, to peer-to-peer mentoring, people who are already successful in their career, to be able to share that knowledge and help the people who are starting in their career not to have the self-doubt. We do need to band together, and that's something that I believe in, and the British Film Designers Guild believes in, that we should unite together, and at least in our knowledge, because where there's knowledge, there's power, and there's strength in numbers. So if you want to know more about the British Film Designers Guild, including membership, all this information can be found at britishfilmdesigners.com. Please check us out, ask lots of questions, email me. I can try to answer anything that you have to say. I do try to speak to everybody. Great. I'm so glad so many of you guys could be here with us today and to have the wonderful words of Mark Scruton and Chuck Parker. Thanks everybody very much. And I hope everybody has a great Wednesday evening.
See you all.
See ya. Bye.
Thank you.